Hello everybody, welcome back to Anglo Election Insights. So much has happened over the last couple of weeks since my last video on the eve of the US 2025 elections. It's impossible to respond to everything, and honestly, I've been busy myself too. So I've tried to let the dust settle a little bit and kind of respond to everything as it plays out, but for today, I thought I would make a video about Victorian politics in the wake of Jess Wilson successfully taking over the leadership of the Victorian Liberal Party from Brad Battin. So this is the ABC's take, talking about the Liberals kind of moving back towards the centre. I don't know why Brad Battin got such a reputation as a conservative or as someone who was like fighting culture wars or whatever. I think he was hitting the right sort of message in terms of crime, but what was ultimately bagging him down was the infighting that was happening below him. So if the Liberals are able to actually achieve this kind of clean slate that they're after, if the Conservative wing of the party is happy enough with Bev McArthur taking over leadership of the upper house team, and they're willing to kind of get behind Jess Wilson, you know, I could definitely see that their stock could improve considerably from this point, and they could, you know, if Wilson does turn out to be a strong leader, which she very well could be, you know, we could be looking at like a pretty good result for the Victorian Liberals, but that's a lot of coulds and potentials. So we'll just have to let it play out. But what I thought I would do today is map out what I see as a new pathway to victory with a more sort of moderate and modern and perhaps relatable face of the Liberal movement for Metropolitan Melbourne in 2026. I think we're probably looking at, rather than a sort of outer suburban regional kind of path to victory through that Brad Battin was maybe looking at, I think with Jess Wilson, we're looking at something more similar to Kennett's wins in the 90s or the Naptime Baillieu map from 2010. And of course, this is no guarantee that or even necessarily me saying, oh, I think the Liberals are going to win. This is just me kind of mapping out what it might look like if from this point they gather some strength behind them. So a while back, with Battin still in charge of the party, of course, I asked viewers this question about where people thought that the swing against Labor was going to be most concentrated, and more than half of you guys said it was going to be outside of Metropolitan Melbourne. Most of you actually, or plurality, were saying in the provincial seats, which would be kind of a good place for it to happen for Labor, because most of those seats, we're talking seats like Bellarine, Geelong, Eureka, Wendouree, Ballarat, Bendigo, East and West, that sort of thing. Those seats are mostly held on double-digit margins, so if all of them swung by 8, 9, 10%, Labor would still hold the lion's share of them, and that would be most of the swing, unless we are looking at like a 10% statewide swing. Some of you guys said the outer western and northern suburbs, so this has been sort of in the wake of COVID politics, where we saw big swings away from Labor in some of these lower socioeconomic areas of Metropolitan Melbourne. You can probably add like the outer southeast to that as well. That's been a potential pathway for the Liberals, but then in 2025 federally we saw the kind of South Asian vote dive away from the coalition to an even greater degree than it had in 2022 or 2019. And only 7% of you guys said the eastern suburbs, which is the traditionally politically volatile part of Metropolitan Melbourne where state elections are won and lost, typically. So with that in mind, let's go and have a look at the map. Now, I've just got the four kind of major parties up top. haven't seen any evidence that, say, the West Party or some of these early announced Teal campaigns or potential Teal campaigns are necessarily gathering the critical mass that they would need. So let's just leave them off the map for the moment. And just so you guys know, I'm not like intimately familiar with all 88 of Victoria's state districts, so I will be going back and forth with this map just to make sure I'm colouring in the right district. So we'll start with some of these safe Nat seats, Mildura, Lowen, all these seats along the Murray Plains. We've got Gippsland South, Morwell. I think that will swing. That could become I think both Shepparton and Morwell could become safe Nat seats as well. So that gets them up to 8. I think Euroa as well. Big swing against the Nats there last time, but I think that had more to do with the retirement of the sitting member who was Steph Ryan, I think. And then in terms of the seat of Ripon, I think it's quite, not clear, but it's looking reasonably likely that Labor's going to lose the seat, but the Liberals have at least 5 or 6 candidates for pre-selection, and the Nats look like they're going to pre-select Joe Armstrong, who's the mayor of Ararat. At this stage, it's typically a Liberal seat. I'm going to give it to the Liberals, but I'll just have to keep an eye on the local campaign. This is the seat where I reside, so I should have a bit more of an idea of how that one's shaping up next year. I think the other one is, we saw federally that politics is still very local, and despite the massive, well, not the massive, but the swing away from the coalition across the country, we did see that Andrew Leithland was able to achieve a really strong swing towards the Nats in the federal seat of Bendigo. If he were to run, and I think it's looking somewhat likely that he will, I think he could probably take Jacinta Allen's seat at this stage, but only just. All right, so that's the Nats. They also might run in Benambra, but for the moment I'm going to give that one to the Liberals. I'm not sure who their main opponent will be. It could be the Nats, it could be that independent. She might run a third time as well. So there are some safe Liberal seats as well. Polwarth, it's trending away from them at this sort of Colac, Otway, or the Otway part of the seat, the Surf Coast area, but I think the sitting member's really quite strong, particularly in these more rural parts. Southwest, that's probably a safe Liberal seat. We've got some more sort of regional seats here. Narrabeen, very safe. Evelyn as well. Warrandyte, that should be safe too. Nepean, that should be safe with Sam Groth. And that's probably it for like safe rural seats. I think Labor will hang on in Bendigo West. That includes more like the Castlemaine, sort of Hepburn end of the seat, which is very sort of alternative lifestyle, greeny, very friendly to Labor. All right, and then I'll start going through some of these provincial seats and some of the metropolitan seats. All right, so for starters, I think a seat like Bellarine could get quite close, but it would take a strong Liberal candidate. They didn't win this one in 2010. There might be a bit of a sophomore swing towards the current sitting member as well, who replaced Lisa Neville. South Barwon's another one. This is one that the Liberals actually held out of government in 2014. And you've got Darren Cheeseman sitting as like a Labor-aligned independent after being kicked out of the party for his antics towards his staff. I forget what exactly it was. Anyway, he's hated locally, and I think there was some talk that he should step aside. There should be a by-election. This is a part of Geelong that has trended quite strongly towards Labor in recent years. I wonder if someone like Jess Wilson would necessarily have slightly better support. I wonder who the Liberal candidate might be as well. Andrew Katos has run. He was the former member. He ran again in 2022. He currently sits on Geelong Council, but it's clear that from the results in the last election that his name wasn't enough to really make much of a difference for the Liberals. At this stage, I think Labor retained that one. Geelong, again, this is becoming quite a safe Labor seat, and I don't think someone like Jess Wilson has much appeal in a seat like Lara. Moving over to Ballarat, I think Wendouree could be quite close. That was a seat on these boundaries, the Liberals maybe would have just won it in 2010. I'll have to check that, but that could get quite close. Eureka, I would give Labor the upper hand, but only just. That one's a little bit borderline. I think Battin probably could have won it. Jess Wilson, I'm not quite so sure. However, next door in Macedon, I think that's another seat where Jess Wilson actually might be, or this kind of more moderate Liberal Party could be a slightly better chance. But for now, I'm giving that as a Labor seat. So we'll flick down towards the Bass Coast and the Peninsula, with the Labor sitting member retiring on a wafer-thin margin in Bass. I suspect that one should go Liberal. I don't think it's going to swing wildly. It does include some growing areas around the bottom of Clyde, and places like Phillip Island are trending away from the Liberal Party a little bit. So it won't be like a free pickup, but they should win it. Hastings is another one, similar sort of situation. Areas like Balnarring and this sort of like Western Port area, not necessarily as friendly to the Liberals as perhaps they once were. Again, not a free pickup. It's a pretty strong local member too, so that they might find that the swing's not actually that big there. Mornington, I think, even if the independent runs again or a different independent runs, I think Chris Cruther will be okay. And then we've got... So now we're heading into the suburbs. So we'll start with the southeast. So Berwick, Brad Battin's seat, I expect he'll recontest, to be honest. He might end up on like a similar margin that he is now. Maybe a couple of percent better. Pakenham, I think the Liberals will be able to pick up that seat with a very popular Labor MP retiring due to health. Monbulk, just to the north. I don't know how to say that. Monbulk. Anyway, this is Molino's old seat. Probably a bit of a sophomore swing towards the new member. But it could be relatively close. Maybe a slight swing towards the Liberals there. So then we've got Cranbourne. I think Labor can hang on there. That was one where if Battin really started to get the better of Jacinta Allen, that could have potentially been in play. But I think the Liberals have this long dream of winning seats like Cranbourne, but it just doesn't look like they're ready to do that right now. Same with the Narre Warrens, to be honest. All right, so then I might jump into Inner Melbourne here, just kind of continue what I've been doing with the Liberals. So we've got... Actually, I might fill in the green seats first. So we've got Melbourne, not necessarily like free defence seats for the Greens. Labor is a little bit more on the nose, and I've been wondering a bit about the state Greens. They're a bit invisible. I don't know if they're going to necessarily gain traction like they did in 2022, and they might not necessarily gain Liberal preferences either. However, I guess the reasons behind the federal Greens dropping off in this part of Melbourne had a bit to do with their antics in federal parliament, the way they were sort of seen as blocking Labor's agenda, particularly on housing. That problem doesn't really exist at the state level. I can see some potential angles for the Greens around the environment, particularly with like the gas industry. Also, now that state Labor has adopted this like tough on crime kind of Queensland style, adult crime, adult time, that sort of stuff, you could see the Greens potentially profiting from a campaign that focuses more on rehabilitation and a different approach to youth offending. that could be the angle. But for now, I think the Greens hold Melbourne, and Richmond. I think if you overlay the federal results and you assume that Liberal preferences go to Labor this time, then that seat would flip back to Labor. For the moment, though, with the incumbent, I'm going to have that as a Green retain. And keeping in mind that I'm drawing this map with a bit of a bias towards the Liberals with their new leadership and sort of saying like, oh, well, maybe with Jess Wilson, this is how the map changes. So I'm not necessarily making this like a map of exactly what I think is going to happen. Brunswick, that should be a pretty safe Green seat. The local member's quite popular there. Now, Paran, really interesting. I think if we're looking at like a 53-47 two-party preferred to the Liberals, which is kind of what I'm drawing this map to, without the personal vote of Sam Hibbins, maybe a bit of preference leakage from Labor, maybe a strong local campaign from the sitting member, I think the Liberals have a small pathway to holding that seat. Probably not when Brad Battin was the leader, but with Jess Wilson, I could just sort of see it happening. Couple of safe Liberal seats here as well. Just make sure I've got the right names. Yep, cool. Okay, so Brighton, Sandringham. I expect decent swings towards the Liberals with Jess Wilson as leader now. Okay, so I think Caulfield, same. Malvern. There'll be a new member there, so there could be a slight swing against. Hawthorn. Just make sure that definitely is Hawthorn. Yeah, it looks like it. Hawthorn, I think Pizzuto will benefit greatly from having Jess Wilson as leader. Probably not to the point where it's a safe Liberal seat. It depends if Ted Ballew's son runs as a Teal as well. And then Jess Wilson herself in queue. I think she probably picks up more than 50% of the primary vote, to be honest. Bulleen, Matt Guy should be fine. So you can see it's this kind of empty eastern half. This is where elections used to be won and lost. So I'll start with the Sandbelt. If the Liberals are winning 53-47, that represents about an 8% swing towards the Liberal Party. That would put a seat like Bentley in play. Whether or not the Sandbelt becomes the sort of political flashpoint that it was back in 2010, you'd expect the Liberals would probably have to win maybe one of these. I'll say Mordialloc, whereas I think Labor can probably hang on in places like Carrum and Frankston. Maybe under Battin, Frankston was under a little bit more threat. They should hang on to in a place like Dandenong, no troubles. Clarinda, same. Oakley, again, these are areas where Labor does quite well. And then you've got Mulgrave. I don't think it could be quite tight, but that was a seat where, again, Brad Battin probably had more of an advantage. Okay, so then we do have a retirement in this seat here, Rowville, but I don't think that member has been around for a long time. But whether or not, I think with Jess Wilson as leader, that probably shores that seat up a little bit. Bayswater, very popular local Labor MP, Jackson Taylor, he's retiring. I think that one is absolutely in play. And then we've got Ringwood with Nick McGowan going to contest Will Fowles. Again, a little bit like South Barwon, there's a Labor-aligned independent who won't recontest. There could be a bit of blowback for Labor there. I think with Wilson as leader, that's one that they would certainly be targeting in a year. Remember, this map's kind of based on like a 53-47 type scenario. And Croydon, this was a close seat and the member is retiring, but I think Liberals could achieve a slight swing towards them even with the departure of that member. These three seats are really where it's at. They would have to flip all three And I think they would in this environment. Box Hill, probably by the skin of their teeth. But you could definitely make the case that even in this environment, Labor hold. Glen Waverley, that should be quite an easy flip. And then Ashwood would be a rather narrow flip as well. So there, you can see kind of this eastern wall of Liberal seats being rebuilt, and that gets them, the coalition, to 41. So let's start filling in a few others. Yan Yin is another one that I think the Liberals would just be able to flip, and if they can run a strong candidate in Melton, I think that one comes across as well. So that gets them to 43. They're one short of a majority. So can they find an extra seat somewhere? Let's see. Werribee, I think Labor hold. It might be a little bit tight down here in Williamstown, but that's more kind of Greens and Teals could come into play there. Speaking of the Greens, I think they can win in Footscray, but only just. Sunbury is another seat where if the Liberals are having a good year, and there's still that realignment in outer suburban Melbourne continues even under the leadership of Jess Wilson, that could be one that would be in play. But maybe not so much places like St Albans, Sydenham, probably not as likely. Nidri, I've heard rumours that they're trying to move Ben Carroll out of this seat. For now, I think they would be able to sandbag it. Calcolo, that's going to be safe. Thomastown, Mill Park, relatively safe. Broadmeadows as well. Here, just filling out a few more of these safer seats. So that leaves a few empty ones on the map. I guess Ivanhoe, that's probably not flipping anytime soon. Bundura, that probably becomes a little bit closer. Okay, so we're left with, what have we got? Seven seats left, and I haven't left any out in the regions. Nope. So to form a majority, the coalition needs to try and win one of these, as well as every seat that I've given them on this map, and that's certainly no guarantee, even in a 53 two-party preferred kind of situation. I think the seat of Point Cook being a little bit more aspirational, if they ran a good candidate, if Jess Wilson came across well in the West, that could be a potential Liberal seat. Definitely not locked in, but there's potential there. I think Danny Pearson's going to be retiring in Essendon. I don't think the Liberals can win on these boundaries with Flemington at the southern end, but they could give Labor a surprising run for their money in a place like Essendon. There are some fairly strong boosts for them there. Eltham is another one, which is sitting on like about a 9% margin. Again, this is where a moderate Liberal could quite significantly outperform someone like Mac Guy or Brad Battin, especially Jess Wilson kind of being based in this sort of inner east area. For now, I think Labor just hold on. And the other one where I thought the Liberals could potentially be in the hunt is Albert Park. The right sort of moderate candidate could possibly snake this one. Possibly. I think a strong vote for the Greens and perhaps Labor being knocked out of the count would probably make that possible. But for now, I think the Labor vote's probably just a little bit too strong. And I think they would hold on. But I could see the Liberal primary climbing up to like 37, 38 from where it is now, which is about an 8% swing towards them. It would just be a matter of if Labor stays ahead of the Greens, I think no matter what happens, they probably win the seat. Whereas if the Greens got ahead of Labor, I wouldn't necessarily guarantee that enough Labor voters would preference the Greens over the Liberals under someone like Jess Wilson. So then you've got these seats here that the Greens have previously done quite well in. The first one is Pascoe. I think the Greens could potentially just get home with the trends that are going on there. Who knows, maybe someone like Samantha Ratnam decides to run for Lower House, we'll see. But I think on this side here with Northcote and Preston, I think Labor are probably going to be okay. Northcote, a reasonably good incumbent for Labor there. I think they would be all right. So that would be my map if we're looking at something like 53 to 47. The coalition winning an absolute bare majority. And the Greens also profiting a little bit with 5 seats to their name. There are probably a few hot takes in here. And there are probably some seats where the Liberals are falling just short. Seats like Eltham, Macedon, Eureka. There might be... We just have to kind of sit back and let it play out and see if Jess Wilson does have some success, whether or not the realignments that are occurring kind of in this part of Melbourne continue or not, or if the strength is rebuilt in the east, as I suspect it might be with Jess Wilson as leader. Anyway, just my opinions. We have to let it play out, and as things do play out, you can be sure that I will be onto it, and the nature of this map will be changing as a result. But for now, this is kind of how I see a potential coalition path to victory under the leadership of Jess Wilson. Thanks for watching, guys. Uploads might be a little bit slower over the next few months. I'm busy with a few other things, but I'll try to keep on top of it as best I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.